The words from my stepmother's phone call cut through me like a knife, each syllable laced with venom. "You think you deserve that money? That trust fund belongs to Tiffany now. She's better than you'll ever be." I clutched the edge of the hotel room desk, struggling to steady my breathing as my heart pounded wildly against my ribs. Janet's voice dripped with satisfaction, her every word carefully calculated to wound. She had done it. Emptied the trust fund my mother had left for me. My stomach churned with a mix of fury and disbelief, but I refused to let it show. My name is Natalie Carter, and at 27, I thought I had finally escaped the suffocating toxicity of my family. I had built a life for myself, working in pharmaceutical sales, constantly traveling across the country, far from their manipulations. This should have been just another Tuesday in Minneapolis, another routine night of preparing for an important client meeting. Instead, I found myself gripping my phone, listening to Janet gloat about how she had stolen what was rightfully mine. "Thanks for letting me know," I replied, forcing my voice to remain calm, betraying none of the storm raging inside me. I could almost picture Janet's smug expression faltering, her carefully planned attack landing without the expected reaction. She had anticipated tears, begging, or rage, anything but quiet indifference. "That's all you have to say?" she pressed, disappointment seeping into her tone. "Tiffany needs that money for her wedding and her new house. You're just going to waste it on your meaningless sales career." I inhaled sharply, my thoughts drifting to my mother, the woman who had worked tirelessly to build her pharmaceutical consulting business from nothing. She had poured her blood, sweat, and tears into securing my future, leaving me the trust fund so I could chase my own dreams. But Janet, who had swooped into our lives just 2 years after my mother passed away, had spent every moment since trying to take it from me. "Is there anything else?" I asked, keeping my voice even. The silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes. What Janet didn't know was that 6 months ago, I had met with Mr. Harrison, my mother's old lawyer. He had warned me about some suspicious inquiries Janet had been making about the trust. Together, we had put safeguards in place, legal protections that ensured any unauthorized access wasn't just impossible, but prosecutable. Just to be procedural. "You've always been such a disappointment," Janet spat, making one last attempt to provoke me. "Your stepsister deserves this more than you ever did." I ended the call and let out a shaky breath. My hands trembled, but not from fear. Everything was documented. Every call, every scheme, every desperate attempt of hers to take what wasn't hers. Janet had finally overplayed her hand, and I was ready to make her pay for it. Living with Janet had been like walking on eggshells after my mother's death. I was 16 when cancer took her away, and my father, desperate to rebuild what was left of our shattered family, remarried just 2 years later. Along with Janet came her daughter, Tiffany, who was 13 at the time. From the very beginning, the tension was unbearable. My mother's trust fund wasn't just money, it was her legacy, her final way of protecting me, even after she was gone. But to Janet, it was something else entirely, an unfair advantage I had over Tiffany. "Your mom wouldn't want you to be so selfish," she would say, feigning concern, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We're all family now." But we weren't, not in any way that mattered. While my father drowned himself in work to cope with his grief, Janet worked meticulously to push me to the sidelines. Tiffany was the shining star of the household. Every minor achievement of hers celebrated as if it were groundbreaking. Meanwhile, my hard-earned academic scholarships and acceptance into business school were barely acknowledged. Janet ensured my father only saw what she wanted him to see. The final straw came on the day of my college graduation. I had fought tooth and nail to get to that moment, graduating top of my class, securing a prestigious job, all while working part-time to support myself. And yet, my father wasn't there. He had missed it because Tiffany had a minor cold. "She needs her father right now," Janet had insisted. That was when I knew. Nothing would ever change. Unless I changed it myself. I moved out the next day. And now, as I stood in my hotel room looking out at the Minneapolis skyline, I realized something. Janet had spent years trying to control me, to take from me, to break me. But this time, she had made a fatal mistake. She thought she had won. She had no idea what was coming next. Focused on building my career, I had left the trust fund untouched. Not because I didn't need it, but because accessing it meant opening the door for Janet's interference. Every time I visited home, she would make cutting remarks about my so-called privileged position, reminding me how Tiffany struggled without the same advantages. It was an exhausting, never-ending battle, one I had chosen to avoid. Until 6 months ago, when Mr. Harrison called to warn me about Janet's suspicious inquiry, everything clicked into place. She had been playing the long game, waiting for the perfect moment to strike, biding her time until she thought I was vulnerable enough to fall into her trap. But she had gravely miscalculated. I wasn't that scared, helpless 16-year-old anymore. I was my mother's daughter, and I had learned from the best how to protect what was mine. The trust fund wasn't just money. It was a symbol of everything my mother had worked for, the legacy she had fought to build. Sitting in my dimly lit hotel room that evening, I pulled out a small, well-worn photo of her, the one I always carried. She was smiling, radiating confidence, exuding the kind of strength I had always aspired to embody. This money wasn't about luxury or convenience. It was meant to be my safety net, my stepping stone, my chance to take risks and build something of my own. Just like she had. I exhaled slowly and dialed Mr. Harrison's number, my fingers steady despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. He answered on the second ring, his voice familiar and reassuring. "Janet finally made her move," I said, cutting straight to the point. "She claims she's transferred everything to Tiffany." "I was expecting this," he replied evenly. "I got an alert about an attempted access to the account this morning. Don't worry, Natalie. The additional security measures we put in place worked exactly as planned. Every attempt was logged and documented." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "So, nothing's actually been transferred." "Not a single penny," he confirmed. "But we've got her dead to rights on attempted fraud. The documentation is bulletproof. Would you like me to proceed with the next steps?" I thought about everything. Years of Janet's manipulations, her snide remarks, the way she had methodically poisoned my relationship with my father. She had been so sure of herself, so convinced she held all the control, that she never even considered the possibility that I might be 2 steps ahead. "Yes," I said firmly. "It's time to end this. Send the evidence to the family lawyer and copy my dad on everything. I want him to see exactly what his wife has been trying to do." "Consider it done," Mr. Harrison said, then added, "And Natalie, your mother would be proud. She always said you were smarter than anyone gave you credit for." After hanging up, I opened my laptop and booked an earlier flight home. My client meeting would have to wait. I had a family matter to attend to. And this time, I would be the one in control. I landed in Boston the next morning. The autumn air was crisp, biting at my skin as I stepped out of the airport. My father's house, the one I had grown up in, looked exactly the same, its white shutters and manicured lawn deceptively serene. But something felt different. Maybe it was me. I had called ahead to let him know I was coming, but I hadn't mentioned Janet's phone call. Some conversations needed to happen face to face. I found them all in the living room. Dad, Janet, and Tiffany. Janet's smug smile faltered the moment she saw me walk in, replaced by confusion at my calm demeanor. "Natalie," my dad said, his brow furrowed. "I wasn't expecting you until later. Is everything okay?" "Actually, Dad, we need to talk." I pulled out my phone and opened the file Mr. Harrison had sent me. Janet called to tell me she emptied my trust fund and transferred everything to Tiffany. "I thought you should see exactly what happened." Janet's face went pale. "I was just trying to help, Tiffany." "Don't." My voice was like steel. "Every attempt you made to access the account was documented. Every call, every forged signature, every single manipulation. It's all here." I handed my father the file. His hands trembled as he flipped through the pages, his expression darkening with each revelation. "Janet, what did you do?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "She's lying," Tiffany jumped in, her face flushed with anger. "She's always been jealous of me." I didn't even acknowledge her. Instead, I pulled out another document, the complete trust fund statement. "The money is still there, safe and untouched. Janet's attempts to transfer it failed because I was warned about her plans months ago. I took precautions. Precautions? Janet spat, her mask of innocence slipping. You set me up. No, I replied calmly, locking eyes with her. I protected what was mine, just like my mother taught me to do. Looking up at Mrs. Peters, I had my greatest. Silence filled the room. My father sat frozen, staring at the overwhelming evidence of his wife's betrayal. Every email she had sent to the bank, every falsified document, every desperate, calculated move she had made to steal my inheritance. It was all there, in black and white, and there was no way for her to talk her way out of this one. I did this for our family, Janet protested, but her voice wavered, the confidence she once carried now slipping away. Tiffany needed... Stop. My dad's voice cracked, his eyes dark with betrayal. Just stop, Janet. These documents. You tried to forge my signature. You lied to the bank. You... He looked up at me then, his expression filled with a pain I hadn't seen since my mother died. Natalie, I had no idea. Of course you didn't, I said softly. Janet made sure of that. Mr. Harrison had organized everything meticulously, presenting a chronological record of Janet's years-long campaign to drive a wedge between my father and me while scheming to get her hands on my trust fund. The latest documents detailed her failed attempt to transfer the money, along with the furious calls she had made to the bank afterward, demanding to know why it hadn't gone through. This is ridiculous, Tiffany shot up from her seat, her face flushed with anger. Mom was just trying to make things fair. Gab has always had everything handed to her. I turned to my stepsister, feeling an odd mix of pity and frustration. Handed to me? I repeated, my voice steady. I worked through college, built my career from the ground up. I never even touched that trust fund. Mom left it to me because she wanted me to have options, just like she had. But Janet couldn't stand that, could she? Janet's composure finally cracked. You ungrateful little... I've already filed charges, I cut her off coldly. The bank has all the evidence of your attempted fraud. Mr. Harrison is handling everything. I turned to my father, my voice softer now. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but you needed to know the truth. 12 years of manipulation hung heavy in the air between us. My dad looked at Janet as if he was seeing her for the first time, and not in a good way. Then, the moment that changed everything happened. My father stood up, his hands trembling as he held the incriminating documents. Janet, I want you out of this house. Tonight. What? Janae's voice rose to a shrill pitch. You can't be serious. After everything I've done for this family? Done for this family? My father's voice was quiet but unyielding. You tried to steal from my daughter. You forged my signature. You've been lying to me for years. Tiffany started crying, but for the first time they weren't her usual manipulative tears. She looked genuinely shocked, as if she had finally grasped the gravity of what her mother had done. The police will want to talk to you, I said to Janet. Mr. Harrison has already filed the reports. The bank's fraud department is involved now. Janet turned on me, eyes blazing with fury. You planned this, she hissed. You knew I would try to access the trust fund. I met her glare without flinching. No, Janet, you planned this. I just made sure I was ready when you did. I turned back to my father, my voice calm but firm. There's more. Mr. Harrison found evidence that she's been skimming money from your accounts too. Small amounts, slowly building up over the years. My dad sank back into his chair, looking devastated. I felt a pang of guilt for being the one to bring him this pain. But he needed to know. He deserved the truth. Get out, he repeated to Janet, his voice flat, final. Both of you. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the divorce. As Janet and Tiffany gathered their things, throwing accusations and tears around in equal measure, I stood quietly by the window. The same window where I used to watch for my mom to come home from work. I could almost hear her voice, steady and reassuring. Always be prepared, sweetheart, and never let anyone take what's rightfully yours. The weeks that followed were filled with long overdue conversations between my father and me. One evening we sat together in the kitchen, the same kitchen where my mother used to help me with my homework. For the first time in years, we truly talked. "I failed you," my father admitted, staring into his coffee cup. "After your mom died, I was so focused on not being alone that I didn't see what was happening right in front of me." "We both made mistakes," I said. "I could have told you sooner about Janet's behavior, but I wanted proof first. I needed you to see it for yourself." The legal proceedings moved swiftly. Janet faced charges of attempted fraud and financial exploitation. She tried to paint herself as the victim, claiming she had only been trying to equalize things between Tiffany and me. But the evidence was overwhelming, and for the first time in a long time, my father saw the truth for what it was. And for the first time in years, I felt truly free. The evidence against Janet was overwhelming. The bank's documentation detailed years of calculated attempts to access my trust fund, a meticulously crafted scheme that had finally unraveled. Tiffany eventually reached out to me via email, claiming she had no knowledge of her mother's plans. I wasn't sure if I believed her, but I could sense she was struggling, grappling with the painful realization of who her mother truly was. "I'm sorry," she wrote. "I always thought you had everything handed to you. Mom made it seem like you were the privileged one, but now I see she was just jealous of what your mom built for you." Her words were unexpected. I had spent years resenting Tiffany for her blind loyalty to Janet, for the way she had effortlessly fit into the role of the favored child while I was pushed to the sidelines. But now, for the first time, I saw her not as an adversary, but as someone who had also been manipulated, just in a different way. With Mr. Harrison's guidance, I finally took a leap I had long hesitated to make. I started my own business consulting firm. It was something I had always dreamed of but had been too cautious to pursue. The trust fund my mother had left me became the seed money for my new venture, just as she had intended. "Your mother would be proud," Mr. Harrison told me during one of our meetings. "She always said you had her business sense and your father's heart. She knew you'd do great things when you were ready." For the first time in over a decade, I felt like I was truly honoring my mother's legacy. My father started coming by my office for lunch every week. Sometimes we reminisced about Mom, sharing memories that Janet had made too uncomfortable to discuss for so many years. Other times we talked about the future. He was finally beginning to look like himself again, the man I remembered from before my mother got sick. "You know what your mom used to say about you?" he asked me one afternoon over coffee. "She said you were like a diamond. Pressure just made you stronger." Life settled into a new, steady rhythm. My consulting firm grew rapidly, attracting clients who appreciated my direct approach and deep industry knowledge. I built a small, dedicated team, including Sarah, a brilliant analyst who reminded me so much of my mother. She had the same drive, the same relentless determination to prove herself. Janet's trial ended in a plea deal. She avoided jail time but was required to pay significant restitution and was permanently banned from working in any financial capacity. The last I heard, she had moved to Arizona to live with her sister, far from the life she had once schemed to control. Tiffany remained in Boston, working as a teacher's assistant. We maintained minimal contact, mostly through occasional emails, neutral, polite, distant. My father threw himself into rebuilding our relationship. He started sharing stories about my mother that he had kept buried for years. How they had met at a business conference, their early struggles to start her company, the late nights spent planning their future. Each story helped heal a piece of what we had lost. One evening, as we sorted through old boxes in the attic, we came across my mother's business journal. Tucked inside was a letter addressed to me, dated just weeks before she passed. My hands trembled as I unfolded the paper and read her familiar handwriting. "My dearest Natalie, I'm leaving you more than money. I'm leaving you the freedom to choose your path. Don't let anyone dim your light or tell you what you deserve. You are stronger than you know, smarter than they give you credit for, and capable of anything you set your mind to. Trust yourself. I do. Love, Mom." Tears welled in my eyes as I traced the words with my fingertips. This was her final gift to me, more valuable than any amount of money. A reminder that she had always believed in me, even when I had doubted myself. I framed the letter and hung it in my office where I could see it every day. It became my mantra. a daily affirmation of where I had come from and where I was going. My father retired from his job and found a new sense of purpose, volunteering at a grief counseling center. He helped other families navigate loss without losing themselves in the process. Sometimes he even consulted for my firm, bringing years of experience and a steady perspective that perfectly complemented my approach. Looking back on everything, I realized that the struggles, the betrayals, the battles I had fought, they had all shaped me. I wasn't just my mother's daughter, I was my own person, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely, unequivocally free. The evidence against Janet was undeniable. The bank's documentation laid out years of calculated attempts to access my trust fund, each effort methodically recorded, each failure leaving behind a digital trail of deception. There was no room for denial or justification. Everything was black and white. Tiffany eventually reached out to me via email. She claimed she hadn't known about her mother's plans. I wasn't sure whether I believed her, but I could tell she was struggling, grappling with the painful truth about the woman she had trusted her whole life. "I'm sorry," she wrote. "I always thought you had everything handed to you. Mom made it seem like you were the privileged one, but now I see she was just jealous of what your mom built for you." Her words lingered in my mind. For years, I had resented Tiffany, convinced she had willingly taken part in Janet's schemes. But now, for the first time, I saw her as someone who had been manipulated just as much as I had, albeit in a different way. With Mr. Harrison's guidance, I finally took a step I had been too hesitant to take before. I started my own business consulting firm. It was something I had always dreamed of but had never dared to pursue. The trust fund my mother had left me became the seed money for my new venture, just as she had intended it to be. "Your mother would be proud," Mr. Harrison told me during one of our meetings. "She always said you had her business sense and your father's heart. She knew you'd do great things when you were ready." For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly fulfilling the legacy my mother had left behind. My father began stopping by my office for lunch every week. Sometimes we talked about Mom, sharing memories that Janet had made too uncomfortable to discuss for so many years. Other times, we talked about the future. Slowly, he began to look like himself again, the man I had known before my mother got sick. "You know what your mom used to say about you?" he asked me one day over coffee. "She said you were like a diamond. Pressure just made you stronger." Life settled into a new rhythm. My consulting firm grew rapidly, attracting clients who appreciated my direct approach and industry knowledge. I built a strong, capable team, including Sarah Diana, a brilliant analyst who reminded me of my mother. She had the same drive, the same unwavering determination to prove herself. Janet's trial ended with a plea deal. She avoided jail time but was ordered to pay significant restitution and was permanently banned from working in any financial capacity. The last I heard, she had moved to Arizona to live with her sister, far from the life she had once tried to control. Tiffany remained in Boston, working as a teacher's assistant. Our contact was minimal, limited to the occasional email, polite, distant, but no longer filled with resentment. My father threw himself into rebuilding our relationship. He started opening up in ways he never had before, sharing stories about my mother that he had kept buried for years. He told me how they had met at a business conference, how they had struggled to build her company from the ground up, the late nights spent planning their future. Each story helped mend the fractures of our past, piecing together the love and history that Janet had spent years trying to erase. One evening, as we sorted through old boxes in the attic, we found my mother's business journal. Tucked inside was a letter addressed to me, dated just weeks before she passed. My hands trembled as I unfolded the paper. My mother's familiar handwriting greeting me like an old friend. "My dearest Natalie, I'm leaving you more than money. I'm leaving you the freedom to choose your path. Don't let anyone dim your light or tell you what you deserve. You are stronger than you know, smarter than they give you credit for, and capable of anything you set your mind to. Trust yourself." "I do. Love, Mom." Tears blurred my vision as I traced the words with my fingertips. This was her final gift to me, far more valuable than any inheritance. A reminder that she had always believed in me, even when I had doubted myself. I framed the letter and hung it in my office, where I could see it every day. It became my mantra, a daily reminder of where I had come from and where I was going. My father retired from his job and found a new purpose in life, volunteering at a grief counseling center. He helped other families navigate loss without losing themselves in the process. Sometimes, he even consulted for my firm, offering his years of experience and a steady perspective that perfectly complemented my approach. Looking back on everything, the betrayals, the battles, the painful lessons, I realized that each trial had shaped me into the person I was today. I wasn't just my mother's daughter. I was my own person. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely, undeniably free. Years later, I find myself amazed at how much has changed. My consulting firm has grown beyond what I ever imagined, now operating in 3 cities, helping pharmaceutical companies streamline their operations, just like my mom used to do. The trust fund she left me didn't just secure my future, it became the foundation for helping others build theirs. It wasn't just an inheritance, it was a legacy, a gift that kept giving. Dad fully retired last year, but he still stops by my office often, mentoring our younger employees. He says it helps him feel connected to Mom's work, to the vision she had for the future. Every Wednesday we have lunch together, making up for all those lost years stolen by Janet's manipulation. Our conversations are lighter now, filled with warmth and shared memories rather than regret. We have finally reclaimed the relationship we once had, the one Janet worked so hard to sever. But the hardest lesson I learned wasn't about money or betrayal, it was about standing up for myself. Mom knew that one day I would have to fight for what was mine, and she made sure I had the tools to do it. She taught me that true strength isn't just about being tough, it's about being prepared, about knowing when to act and when to wait. Patience, resilience, and strategy. Those were the real gifts she left me. Sometimes, I visit the old house where I grew up. Dad still lives there, but it feels different now. The walls have been repainted, the furniture rearranged. Every trace of Janet's presence has been erased. In Mom's old office, now transformed into a cozy library, I recently found her collection of business books. Inside one of them, I discovered notes she had written about teaching me to run her company one day. I never got that chance with her. But I'm building something of my own now, something that carries echoes of her wisdom in every decision I make. The trust fund she left me was never just about money. It was about self-belief, about knowing when to stand my ground when others tried to take what was rightfully mine. Janet's attempt to steal my inheritance taught me something invaluable. Sometimes, people show you exactly who they are. And the best response? Be ready. Looking back, I'm grateful for those difficult years. Not because they were easy, but because they shaped me into someone my mother would be proud of. Someone who doesn't just survive challenges, but grows stronger because of them. The family photo albums have been reorganized, keeping only the memories that matter. On my desk at work, I keep my favorite picture, Mom, and me at her office, both of us laughing about something long forgotten. It reminds me daily that while some people will try to tear you down, others will build you up in ways that last a lifetime. On the anniversary of my mother's passing, my father and I visited her grave together. We brought fresh flowers from her favorite garden, a tradition we had started that first year after Janet was gone. Standing there in the quiet, I pulled out the letter I had found in Mom's journal and handed it to my father. He read it silently, his hands trembling slightly as he held the worn paper. "She was always thinking ahead," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "Even when she was fighting for her own life, she was fighting for yours too." In that moment, I realized something. Every step I had taken to protect her legacy, every decision to stand firm, every choice to build something meaningful, it was all her final gift to me. "She would be so proud of you," Dad said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "And I couldn't be prouder to call you my daughter." Together we stood in quiet reflection, knowing that while some wounds never fully heal, love and resilience have the power to transform even the deepest scars into strength. Looking back on everything I've endured, I realize that life has a way of teaching us the lessons we need to learn, even when those lessons come wrapped in hardship and betrayal. If there's one thing my journey has taught me, it's that strength isn't about avoiding struggles. It's about facing them head-on, prepared and unwavering. For years, I let others dictate my worth. I let them make me feel like I was undeserving of what my mother had worked so hard to build for me. But I've come to understand that no one can take from you what you are willing to fight for. My mother knew that one day I would have to stand my ground. She made sure I had the tools, the knowledge, and the resilience to do so. She taught me that true strength isn't about aggression. It's about patience, strategy, and knowing when to act. And above all, she taught me that self-worth isn't something given, it's something claimed. To anyone who has ever felt overshadowed, dismissed, or undervalued, know this. You are not defined by the opinions of others. You are not bound by the narratives they create about you. People will try to take advantage of your kindness, underestimate your abilities, and manipulate your circumstances to their benefit. Let them reveal who they truly are, and when they do, be ready. Preparation is power, knowledge is power, integrity is power. I built my life on these truths, and because of them, I reclaimed what was mine. Not just my trust fund, not just my mother's legacy, but my own sense of self. The hardships I faced didn't break me. They refined me. They taught me to be the kind of person who doesn't just endure challenges, but grows stronger from them. So if you ever find yourself in a position where someone is trying to take what is rightfully yours, whether it's your confidence, your dreams, or your future, remember this. You are stronger than you think. You are smarter than they give you credit for. And you are capable of so much more than they ever expected. Trust yourself, believe in your own worth, and never, ever let anyone tell you what you do or do not deserve. Because in the end, the most powerful thing you can ever do is stand firm in who you are.